Let's get right into it, Mike, because this was the main conversation coming out of the game on Sunday night. The holding penalty that was thrown on James Bradberry at the final drive of the game. Your two thoughts on it, please.
Well, my main thought is I just hate that that's part of the conversation.
Of course.
It's just like officiating this year can't get out of their own way. And so even if something is a legitimate call, which I think it is at the end of the game, it's still the main part of the conversation. When it happened, I saw the flag come. I knew which official threw the flag. I knew which player he was responsible for, so I ran back the line feed, which is the live shot that people see on television, and it was a similar pattern that the Chiefs had run for 2 touchdowns. And I saw the grab by the back of the jersey, and it's in what they are taught, it is a clear hold. And so I said immediately to the producer, to Rich Eisen, it's a defensive hold, and then I said it to Kevin Burkhardt also. But then, of course, emotions kind of get involved, and my great friend who I absolutely adore, Greg Olson, went down the path of it being a ticky-tack and call, and not one that you want to call at that time, which is kind of foreign language to me in the first place. And so I think that, we kind of compounded a bit the controversy, and I applaud the player, who said, I held him. I grabbed the jersey. I tugged it. I was hoping they wouldn't see it. But it is just one of those where I clearly cannot say that it was an incorrect call because there was a grab and there was a restrict. Now, in my mind, I'd love to say, well, what would have happened if he wouldn't have called it? Would there have been less controversy if he wouldn't have called it? Yeah, I think that probably would have been the case. But on the other hand, it is a hold, and the young kid stepped up and made the call.
And I think we now need to tread into the territory of what Greg Olson was treading into, which I know you don't. And that's why I want to give you the floor here, Mike. I know how you feel about, well, it doesn't matter if foul's a foul. It doesn't matter if it's in the first quarter of week 1 or the last 2 minutes of Super Bowl 57. You see it, you call it, except for the fact that we as fans see so many things that are not called, and they are fouls, but they're not called, and we are assuming it's because the refs do want to stay out of the way. And that's the issue here. Is like, yes, did he restrict him? Sure. Did he tug his jersey? Yeah. But should that be called? The Super Bowl 57.
Well, I can make a case early in the. I can make a case early in the game. I thought there was one that should have been called that wasn't. And so we always talk about the consistency, and sometimes sometimes you, as officials, sometimes you get angles and can see things, and sometimes you're blocked out. If you're a deep official, you have one key, you have one player that you watch, and if a grab happens, it can happen in between, the players in between you and the grab, and you don't see it. I mean, there are times where you kind of go, my God, how could they not see that? And then when you break it down mechanically in review afterwards, you can see how that possibly happens. But on the other hand, I get it. We want to be consistent, but there are things that are missed all day, not all day long, but, every game there are things that are missed. But the notion of makeup calls, the notion of calling the game different in the last minute, it just doesn't fly. It doesn't fly. I mean, because, are we going to officiate this game because, we want the fans to see maybe the Eagles getting the ball back? Who knows if they would have won, if they'd have gotten the ball back with a minute and a half to go. You can't officiate the game that way. And if you do, and I would say this, if there was any single official that when I was running the officiating program that felt that way and officiated that way, in other words, that I'm not calling anything in the last minute of the game of Super Bowl 57 or whatever, I'd fire his butt right after the game. So, it's hard enough to officiate this game, but to try to, isolate situations to where, well, I'm going to officiate this differently. then I would have maybe done it earlier. I mean, it just doesn't fly with me. And really, I kind of admire an official who sees the foul and clearly thinks it's a foul. I admire the fact that when he steps up and actually throws it, and then, doesn't even realize it at the time because everything's flashing through your head. And the last thing that you're doing is thinking about, down and distance and what is this and what is it? If I called it, you see it, you throw. And I admire the guy that steps up and does that. But again, like I say, otherwise than that, I thought the game was officiated fairly well. There wasn't a lot of fouls. There was one replay decision that I disagreed with. But overall, I thought it was good. But then, it's just the way that this year seemingly has gone, and including in the playoffs, it's just, even if you do something that at least I consider right, you still end up being the story.
Well, Mike Pereira here on the Rich Eisen Show, and we'll get to that replay that you thought should not have been overturned, and I can guess which one it is at this moment, but just putting a button on the hold call. Part of the reason why I think there is an issue that folks have is when the flag came in, too. Like, the initial restriction that I don't think the Fox replay that got tweeted out all over the place showed happened almost immediately. And then the flag comes arcing in as they're entering the end zone, into which the ball flew way over everybody's heads. So even you see that, and maybe the restriction couldn't have even prevented, anything, because the ball wasn't going to land in Juju Smith-Schuster's hands anyway. So what do you say about that, about when the flag came in, Mike?
Well, it's another one, late flags. I mean, someday I'm going to write a story about what I think are the myths, and late flags, happen because of a process. When you actually see, and this is a process of how it plays out in this situation. When you see a potential grab, what you have to do is you have to look back to the quarterback and find the quarterback and make sure that when that grab occurred, that he still had the ball, that it wasn't in the air, because defensive holding is a foul that occurs before the pass is thrown. So it's a process that takes a little bit of time. And, we have always told officials, go slow. That's the mantra. Go slow. Don't rush, and make sure in your mind you know what you have. And so I'm not one of those that buys into the notion of, the late flag, so he changes his mind, after the play is basically done. And, and so I don't buy into that notion. I buy into the notion of, is it a foul or is it not a foul? And you are right. I mean, the ball landed, well away from where Schuster Smith ended up. But then on the other hand, you look and say, without being grabbed at the line of scrimmage, would the pass have gone to a different place? Would it maybe thrown it to him in a different place? But I could also make a case without the grab, maybe he would have been fairly close to where the ball landed. But again, it doesn't make any difference if the action occurs before the ball is thrown. And that's the key when it comes to defensive holding.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.